this past fall, 2023, Emily Bowen Cohen published her first book. It's called Two Tribes. It's a really powerful and quite unexpected middle grade graphic novel about a tween with divorced parents torn between two heritages, Jewish and Native American. Even if you're not a tween or even a teen, I think you'll enjoy this story about a girl searching for her identity. I loved it. And it's really an unusual story. So I'm really delighted to welcome Emily Bowen Cohen as our guest at Lunch. Emily, you can tune in.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for that nice introduction. I'm always so thrilled when people are interested in the book, even if they're not themselves tweens or teens. So that's lovely.
Yeah, and I'm
Thank
really
you.
not a tween or teen, and I loved it. Oh, and here you can all see it. It's also, and Emily's the artist as well as the author, which completely astonishes me. It's like being able to multitask in some incredible way. And we're going to talk about that process in a little bit. But I think first, Emily, as I said, I really loved the book, and it's gotten wonderful reviews, and deservedly so, just because we probably don't have a lot of tweens in our audience. Could you summarize the story a bit for them? And
Sure.
Yeah, just to get started.
Sure. So Two Tribes is sort of loosely inspired by the events in my own life. I'm also Jewish and Native American. The story is about Mia, who is 12 years old, and she just had her bat mitzvah. And she gets fed up with her mom and her new stepdad. So she decides to steal her bat mitzvah money and run away to visit her Native American father and her family there in Oklahoma. And in the course of the adventure, she has a lot of ups and downs, but she learns in the end how to kind of reconcile the two sides of her identity.
Well, that is an excellent summary.
Okay, good.
It's not always easy to do that with your own work. And so, of course, I admit after I finished the book and saw it was inspired by your life, I Googled around and saw that your own life was similar, but actually also quite different, and seemed to me sad. I mean, not your life, but the events that, yeah. So I was wondering if you would mind just telling the audience a little bit about the part that inspired the book, the part that's not in the book, but is a different story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unfortunately, my path to reconciling my own two mixed families, I was much older than Mia, so that was unfortunate. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma called Okemah, which is the home of Woody Guthrie. Just our claim to fame. Yes, it's very exciting. But there's only about 3,000 people there. About a quarter of the population, though, is actually from my own tribe, the Muscogee Creek Nation. We were living there. My father was a doctor, and he worked for the Creek Nation Hospital, but he passed away when I was 9. And so at 12, we moved from Oklahoma to New Jersey, where and we completely lost touch with his side of the family. So, fast forward about 20 years, I was married and I had 3 kids. And that's when I decided to go back to Oklahoma and reunite with my father's side of the family. So the part of the book that's inspired by my real life is that process of like what it takes, what it took for me to feel like this was something I had to do. And then taking the big step to take a really scary journey, and then really recognizing that only by immersing myself in both sides of my identity in a really deep way, that was the only way I could kind of feel like whole as both things, I guess.
Oh, wow. That is really fascinating. And actually, even though, as you said, the path that your heroine takes in the book is very different and she's much younger, I think resonates very much with what you're saying. I do have to ask you, how did your parents meet?
Oh, sure. So yeah, it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty American, I guess. So my father, who grew up in Oklahoma, he was the first in his family to go to college. And he was at the University of Oklahoma, and he was considered a very promising native student, studying pharmacy. So he, in 1969, you know, it was right after the civil rights movement, and Harvard University wanted to recruit students of color to be in their medical school. So they actually recruited my father from the University of Oklahoma, and he went to Harvard Medical School. And my mother was a student at Wellesley College, which
Wow.
Wellesley College girls take buses to Harvard to go to the parties. And my mother's roommate is a Pueblo, which is Navajo woman. And so my mother's roommate said, "You should come with me." They actually were attending, I thought it was a party, like a mixer, but they were actually attending a civil rights meeting for American Indian rights. And my mother's roommate, who she's still very dear friends with today, went with her. And that's where they met. That's where my mother met my father.
Wow,
that's where they met each other. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
what an incredible story that is. That may be your next book, actually. It's
You
pretty.
know, it's, well, it is set in their time. Like, I do have a character who's like an American Indian activist.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. And was your mother's family actively Jewish? I mean, were they? I don't know
They
what
were,
that means even, because
yeah.
here at the AJH, we appreciate all different ways of being Jewish, but
Yes,
were they in some way Jewish?
they were and are in some way Jewish. Yeah, you're right. That is an interesting question. And what does that mean? Um, my my grandparents both grew up very traditional, and I think sort of by the time I was around, were embracing. We still celebrate all the holidays, but we also had Christmas. You know, so they were sort of embracing everything they could. And I think that also resulted in my grandparents, both of them, all of her children married non-Jews, and that seemed to be acceptable. You know, they weren't working against that, so they were welcoming of their non-Jewish in-laws, I'd say. But it isn't so. I'm married to an Orthodox Jewish man, and we met in college. So that question of like, are they actively Jewish? I understand the breadth of that. And I remember my great grandmother, who's the Jewish one, was like, "We really wanted you to marry someone Jewish, but did he have to be this Jewish?" They were sort of like, it kind of like they were more. It was interesting. They were a little bit more. They had kind of pushed that part away, and it was so surprising to them that I was sort of embracing it again. So
Yeah, but as a kid, you were saying you didn't really come to this really, I don't know if curiosity is the right word, but this may be obsession with your father's heritage,
yeah,
the father's side of
yeah.
your heritage. So, I know you were pretty young when your dad died, but did he embrace Judaism, or was your family secular, or how did it work when you were little?
When we were little, we were secular. When my older sister, started to be around bat mitzvah age, my mother, for a number of reasons, my mother really felt compelled to give us a Jewish education. In Oklahoma, we were really, I mean, there's Christianity everywhere. In our small town, there's 6 churches, and we were the only Jewish family. I mean, it was really nothing. And so my father embraced Judaism to the point where we owned a house in Tulsa, which is where the nearest Jewish community was, so that we could go to Sunday school on the weekends. So we would travel from
Wow.
our small town into the city, and we had a house that was within walking distance of the Reform synagogue. so that we could get extra Jewish training. So I say that's pretty supportive. He himself was not religious at all. He was not into religion. Um, he had some really bad experiences with his stepfather, who was a preacher. So he really did not. He was himself very uncomfortable with religion. However, he was very supportive of my mother and how she wanted to raise us. Is how I could put it.
I see. So
Yeah.
he was from the just so I pronounce it,
Yes.
Muscogee. So he was from the Muscogee tribe through his mother's side, not his father's side.
So okay. So yes, I know it's
This is such an
so
American story, but
beautifully.
I think it's important to explore it, right?
It's absolutely. It's so beautifully complicated. So my grandmother is Muscogee, and both of her parents were as well, my great grandparents. My grandmother married my father's father, who is my grandfather, I suppose. I don't know his background exactly because he abandoned her before she gave birth to my dad. So I believe he was. I've done some research. I believe he was Scottish, perhaps, because he gave us the last name Bowen, or English. I don't know, but somewhere in there. And so probably not native. However, since I don't know him, and he never met my father, we don't know. So my father grew up with my grandmother in a single family household. He lived with his aunts and cousins, and until she married her second husband. I'm not even sure I don't know if they were ever married. I don't know. But and he was I don't know if he was a preacher, but like some kind of minister in the Native American church, the Muscogee Baptist Church, I believe.
And did you, as a little kid, have a relationship with your grandparents on that side of the family?
So by the time I was born, the stepfather had passed away. So I never met him, but we saw my grandmother a lot. She lost I found out actually when I went to Oklahoma that she had a daughter who died before she was 1 year old and that was my father's sister. So it was just my father and her. So they were really close. And we would often go visit my grandma. She lived in Henrietta, which is like 30 minutes away from Okemah, and we would visit her pretty frequently. And that is, I do remember one of the other complications is though she was a very devout woman, and so she would read us stories from the New Testament, and we would celebrate Christmas with her and Easter. So
that's interesting. So with
yeah.
her, it was really more of a Christian
for sure
heritage than Muskogee.
Well, that's also interesting. The way that my grandmother and my family now celebrate their customs is through the church. My great grandfather actually was the preacher in our Muscogee church. So the cultural elements are now really enmeshed in Christianity. There's no separation. And since my mother is Jewish, she did not want us to go to church. And my dad was not into it. So we didn't go because it was a religious Christian place. Since then, yeah. Yeah. Complicated.
So this is so interesting because before the broadcast started, Emily and I were talking about Killers of the Flower Moon, the new Martin Scorsese adaptation of the book that came out a couple of years ago. And in that book, I'm not going to do a movie review here, but there was a big element of the church and the Native Americans going to church in the movie, and there is a
Yes.
religious element to it that I didn't fully appreciate. But now as you're speaking, I guess that makes total sense. It's part of the assimilation. And I guess that's something I don't know. So I was wondering, before we move to the next question, I have so many questions for you, because I think
Thank you.
in this really interesting way, you're distilling a lot of the issues or complications of being an American and being of not the mainstream culture, and how families accommodate it and keep their heritages alive. And I was just wondering, though, before we went on, have you had reaction from the Native community to your book? Have you spoken to people? Have people written to you about it?
I've gotten a lot of responses from Native American Jewish people, which has been such a thrill from across the country, which is so cool.
And so you're not the only one.
I'm certainly not the only one. Besides my sisters, we are. I mean, I wouldn't say we're a like mighty bunch, but we're around. Especially in Oklahoma, I've gotten a few people have reached out to me, and it's always a delight. We all have very different experiences.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now we do have to move to your husband, who I have to say, when I Googled about you and I saw he went to the Maimonides school. I mean, that's serious Jewish, right? That's not just.
That's serious Jewish.
Right. So did you met at school?
Yeah. So we were both at Harvard, and he himself is he's an interesting human. We both met, we were on the Harvard Lampoon, which is the comedy, the humor magazine. And he would come in with his kippah, and he's hilarious and was the funniest guy there. So, and adorable. So we met in college and got married. He actually, the first time we went out, he was like, I don't date casually. If we're gonna go on this date, like I'm saying basically like maybe we'll get married. And I was like,
was this the first
on the first date? It was the first date. I was 19 and he was 21. 1990, whatever, not your typical college boy. So, and then, we got married right after college. So
that is kind of incredible. And so how did his family react? How did you, I mean, I guess under Jewish law, you're Jewish.
Yes.
But how did they react to this? I mean, how did you, or were you still, I guess, back up a second. At this point in your life, were you pretty much identified to yourself as Jewish, or did you talk to me a little bit about this? Because your father had died quite a few years before that. Did your mother remarry like the girl in the book? She didn't.
No. I wish she had remarried someone like Roger. Roger's the stepdad, and as I wrote the book, I really came to really enjoy Roger. My mother did not remarry. So we moved to New Jersey. And at that point, I kind of feel like before I had my bat mitzvah. So then I kind of felt like we kind of switched, and I was like just hanging out with the Jews, because there are no other Native Americans in my school in New Jersey. It's been interesting. So I felt very secure in my Jewish identity by the time I went to college. I was really excited, because so many people, they knew I wasn't just regular Jewish, I guess, because they did not, and also I was from Oklahoma. So they were like, what's your background? And in a way, sort of like people questioning, like, where are you from? I was like, I'm Native American. And in a way, like that was, it sort of helped my Native identity, because it was such a question. Like I couldn't kind of escape people identifying me as something besides, Jewish. So when I got to college, I was very excited to be with a Native American community again. And at Harvard, there's a Native American at Harvard group, and I jumped right into that. So I was searching for what that all meant, but I definitely felt both Jewish and Native American. My in-laws are wonderful, wonderful, nice people. And they were really, they were lovely. They were a bit concerned, I've learned since our over the years, they were a bit concerned that because I wasn't religious, you know, my husband would stop being religious. Was a concern. So yeah, you know, it's been 25 years now, so and we still have a kosher kitchen. So.
You do have a kosher kitchen, so that was
Oh
new.
yes.
Oh, that's a
Oh yeah.
you're full on I mean, not
Yeah.
religious, maybe, but
Yeah.
religious.
Yeah. We keep Shabbat. I have a kosher kitchen. I definitely wouldn't say I'm religious, and I don't even call myself Orthodox anymore because I feel like it doesn't really align with my practice, and I don't want to give people the wrong idea, you know, like, you know. But my husband is, and it's. I really enjoyed learning, deep diving into Judaism when I was in college through my sort of husband's guidance, I guess. And I it was challenging because it was like a whole different thing than what I'd grown up with.
Yeah.
All the traditions and all the rituals. I mean, yeah, it was boot camp.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe in a way that you wouldn't have if you hadn't come from a mixed background.
I think this is something that's in the book too. I really felt like it was so precious. I felt like there was such a lack. I was so removed from my native identity, and I had so little access at that time to all those rituals and all the cultural stuff. That to have all of the Jewish traditions and culture right at my fingertips felt really, really special. And I felt like if I can, why wouldn't I just sort of, you know, immerse myself in all of that? And that's sort of in the book a little bit. The grandma kind of chastises Mia, her granddaughter, because she says she doesn't want to be Jewish anymore. And the grandma's like, no. It's so important for you to take that if you can. And I really feel like if I didn't have, like, I think of my grandma, my native grandma, and you know, she went to an Indian boarding school. She didn't know the language. We didn't have any of, at that time, we didn't have the Muscogee language, really. There, now there's been a resurgence, but like at the time, like my grandma couldn't speak it. And it, you know, if I didn't know and see people who were trying so hard to maintain tradition in like the hardest way possible, I don't think I would have been as drawn to really immersing myself in Judaism in the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm going to hold the book up again. People should really
Okay.
order it
Thank
because I
you.
think it's so good. But I really do think that uh, I think I think it was very smart, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, to focus the book on somebody Emily Mia's age, because
Yeah.
she's real, especially at bat mitzvah age. I think when kids go through a lot of self-reflection and identity and why am I doing this, and I think you captured that really well. And then this whole other level of not just as you're speaking now, not just going back to Oklahoma, not just going back to her native roots, but now you're bringing in this extra complication of a people whose traditions had already been somewhat disappeared through assimilation.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, I think you've got a lot of further exploration there.
Oh. Yeah, it's a story that has it. Yeah, it's complicated. I couldn't figure out how not to just. It had to be as complicated as it actually is, I guess.
Right, and what I wanted to ask you is, so you have 3 kids. How old are they,
Mhm.
and how have you introduced their heritage to them?
Oh, so I do have 3 kids. I have twin daughters who are 19, and I have a son who is 15. They're all about to turn 16 and 20, so I had to do the math.
Uh-huh,
um,
uh-huh.
I really felt compelled to travel to Oklahoma to reunite with my family when they were little, purposely because I really wanted them to understand where the Native community is and that they have family. And I really wanted them, I just wanted that to be part of their life from the very young, just, yeah. And for them to have access to them in a way that I didn't, because my dad died. So we visited Oklahoma for the first time when my son was 2 and my daughters were 6. And we really, I mean, I have to say, my husband too, he was, I mean, I knew he would be supportive. And so it really gave me a lot of courage to reach out to them. And we really have made an effort to little by little try to stay in touch with them. You know, as awkward as that can be sometimes when you don't, when you know, I love them, but we don't know each other, you know. So we've really tried to include our Native family in bar and bat mitzvahs, for example. Like they've come to visit. I've taken a couple trips out there with my kids, and now that they are older, I'm very, I don't even know, it feels like a miracle. My daughters are both well, one of them in particular is involved with Hillel at her school, and also they're both involved in the Native American student groups. So yeah, so I'm really pleased that they feel enough of confidence, I guess, to kind of like own that side of their identity.
So
Yeah,
you
and I'm grateful
started
for
this
it.
exploration not because you were thinking of writing a book about it initially, or
Um,
were you?
I was always sort of, I wanted to write about Native issues, and I was sort of doing it, because I wanted to increase the visibility of Native Americans in popular culture. And so I knew I wanted to write about being Native. And, and so I was like Mia does, I was researching in books, just like Mia. That's also part of the story. And I quickly realized what a lack that was, because they're not written from a Native American point of view. And so it was sort of like, I kind of felt like it was like the symptom of my like obsession. Like I knew that I had to go and visit my family, because I was reading all these stacks of books and I was like, this isn't it. I'm not finding here what I need. Yeah. So and it was a good, because I'm an artist, because I just sort of like, that is how I've grappled with things, is by drawing it. So that kind of led into a big storm, I guess, that kind of the perfect storm that actually pushed me to go and reunite with my family.
That's so interesting. Well, and so that was something else I wanted to ask you about, because when we were talking beforehand, I asked you if you were the author and artist, and you said, oh, it was funny to be called an author because you thought of yourself as an artist, and yet you worked at the Harvard Lampoon. Were you there as a cartoonist or as a?
Yeah, and actually, I think I could probably blame them for a little bit of this. But no, and at the Lampoon, it's like you you audition to be part of the magazine as either an artist or a writer, and it's like, and so it's almost unheard of, because the writers are like, the writers are up here and the artists are here, and the business people are down here.
That's so interesting.
So like it's like very weird for an artist to try to write. I don't know if that exists. I don't know if that exists other places, but that's why. I think the only reason why. You think so?
No,
yeah.
No, I think it's in general.
Yeah.
But I do wonder now, because the graphic novel has become a much more, not just accepted, but cool form, I think, over the last few years. Whereas I think I was saying, when I first read graphic novels, who is that guy, R. Crumb or whoever? They were like dirty and I mean,
yes,
hilarious,
underground,
very underground. And now they're a whole art form. And what I wondered was, at what point did it start to coalesce in your mind that you could merge these two things, the writing?
I don't know if you know the author Jeremy Dauber. He's a professor of Yiddish at Columbia University. We went to college together, and so we're real friends, and stayed in touch. And I think I was whatever. We're working on a project together for which I was the artist. And I told him I told him what I wanted to work on and what I was just like the stuff that what I wanted to work on next. And he actually has since written a book about comics, and he was like, it sounds like what you want to do is write a graphic novel. And I was like, yes, of course you're right. And I do acknowledge him in the book, so I will acknowledge him here again publicly. So it wasn't just I think it was really helpful to have encouragement from it was just really helpful to have encouragement from friends, and of course my husband was encouraging me, but you need to hear that from other people.
And then of course since that, I was just thinking, had you read Mouse? I mean, obviously that was
yes,
Mouse
was was very influential, and especially was Alison Bechdel's Fun Home.
Yes,
I mean, that was like, because she's also sort of talking about her dad's death and like searching for identity, and it was so beautiful. Yeah, so those two books were really influential. Yeah,
yeah,
for
maybe
sure.
The Play is next. I mean, that's sort of
well, and her play was great.
It was great. It was great, but I could see this being a play as well. I mean,
thank you.
So I don't know, you're in LA, maybe you can make that happen. So I have a very hard question for you now, but I really do think it's important to ask.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of your book and your background. So your book came out in August or September.
Yeah.
And so presumably you've been promoting it throughout the fall. And we also know that in the fall, there was October 7th and the Israel and Hamas war. And what I'm wondering, a few things, has that come up in conversation with you? Because, as somebody you're from two marginalized tribes who are different two tribes, but a lot of conflict in other marginalized tribes. And I wonder if that's come up for you in conversations in terms of in talking about the book, and then also how you've processed the war with your own kids.
Okay. Wow.
I know it's a big, but I do feel you.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. You're absolutely right. My first book launch event was in the end of October. And obviously, like since then, I have had several events. I was even on college campuses promoting the book, and speaking to audiences that were both Native and Jewish, as well as, everything in between. And even from my first launch event, I really felt like I couldn't not address it. I mean, on October 6th, I had over some people from my synagogue, and their son is in the IDF. So I saw them the next day at synagogue, and we had actually been talking about my graphic novel. And, I don't think they were at the launch event, but I knew there were so many people in the audience who were really, and we've got family in Israel too. Everyone was being impacted by it. So I made a point to start my talks by just sort of naming it and acknowledging that first of all, that everyone showed at that point, and people were just coming out and going to something that was not a vigil or something, I felt very remarkable, and I felt very blessed and honored. And so I will say, one of the things, the woman who is the author author curator is how she calls herself, author-curator of Hartron, which is the Native American focused imprint of HarperCollins that my book is with. He has said before to me, gave me these earrings, and she said, Cynthia Leidy Smith, and she was like, storytelling is a form of medicine. And I really wanted to bring that message, especially to a Jewish audience at that time, because the book does kind of go into things about, loss and how you cope with things that can feel unfathomable, and hopefully that's some kind of, especially when we were going through it all so much in October, like, it's just like, I mean, it's just like I'm here, let's just feel all of this. And I hope this story that I'm going to tell you can help you just feel something. And it was really interesting to be on college campuses. I went to visit my daughter's schools and my niece's schools, and in some of those places, we wouldn't hold. If it was, how can I put this? We tried not to have the book event at a Hillel, because I think at that point, the Native communities, the Native student communities in particular, who feel, I mean, I think it's really hard not to feel viscerally tied to the Palestinians. It's just like it's just really hard it feels very familiar, like a familiar history, and you can't see those pictures, and it's just feel like some kind of kinship as, I think, a Native American person, right or wrong, whatever, it just happens. And anyway, so yeah, I felt very torn. Yeah. We've had a lot of conversations around our dinner table, a lot.
Right. Well, I think it's a conversation a lot of people are having.
Yeah.
I think it's a harder conversation to have two thoughts in your mind at once, that
Yeah.
nobody should be killing anybody, and
Yes.
all of those things, and how do we respect,
Yeah.
and I know that sounds very idealistic and improbable, but I do think you're sort of right in the middle of it.
Yes. No, and internally, I feel like I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just like, like in the audience, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, and I appreciate her, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that, but I did
No,
think
not at all.
it's important. And I think you're saying there's no answer. It's just, how do we at least feel for each other?
Yes. I mean, at least that's the first step, is just to acknowledge that we're all in pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to the Q&As, and they have much easier questions, or maybe not. So this is something we were discussing beforehand. I know you guys were thinking we had this endless conversation, but we did have a pretty good conversation teeing up. So did somebody wants to know if you saw the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, and what did you think of it?
Oh, yes, I did see Killers of the Flower Moon. I also read the book, as I shared a little bit with Julie earlier. So I knew that the book is great. The book is great. It does have sort of a white savior narrative. The FBI agent comes, as I recall, and cleans up, saves the day. So So I was very excited when I learned that Scorsese was reaching out to the Osage Nation to talk about. I believe they totally rewrote the movie. They rewrote the movie after speaking to the Osage Nation, and I think Leonardo DiCaprio, who was originally going to be the FBI agent, then became the husband of the main character. So, I mean, that alone is really amazing. So, absolute credit to them. As an Oklahoma girl, Oklahoma has never looked better. That art direction, I know the art director is a big famous guy, and oh boy, you can really see the care that both he and Scorsese put into just the filming. Okay, so yes, compliment sandwich. Okay, that is all. I love it. Okay, in the middle of that, I will say, and I'm encouraged to speak about this because I had a conversation last night with my Native Jewish friend, and we had the same sort of conclusion. To my eyes, the Osage, the stuff that the sort of tribe, to me, the stuff that appeared to be what they wanted, the tribe wanted to see in the movie, to me, that felt like it could have been stitched into the narrative a little bit more cohesively. And I know it's hard. It especially, like, we're all trying to figure out how to tell other people's stories in a really meaningful way, and in a way that is honoring them. I guess I was like, wished. One of my friends say last night, he said, he wished Scorsese had some more Indian friends, because I think then it could have been incorporated a little bit a little bit more seamlessly. Okay. Okay. And then, but I'm going to end by saying also beautiful performances. And I was crying when Lily Gladstone won a Golden Globe. And she really, I mean, I think she deserves everything she's getting. Because, and you know what? She looked like my family, you know, like it wasn't, that also was great. Like, so that's not my full thoughts about Killers of the Flower Moon, but that is,
Well,
I could talk about this for an hour.
No, I appreciate that. So we're getting our friendly warning that our time is almost up.
That went so fast.
I thought somebody asked a really fun question, and maybe that's a good one to, so how does the native sense of humor compare to the Jewish sense of humor?
Well, this is a really big question. Okay, I don't know if this is true or not. This is like kind of off the top of my head. But I did have to think about this for the book because I wanted to, my husband's a comedy writer, so it's like really hard for me to write jokes, but I had to try. And so there's a moment when like, you know, it's Mia's dad and Mia's stepdad, and they both have different senses of humor, you know? Okay, so I was trying to figure out, because Jewish humor to me is a little bit more familiar. Okay, I was on the Lampoon, my husband's a comedy writer, you know, so, you know, there's like wordplay, there's, you know, it's like sharp, it's a little biting, you know? And I was like, what is it about native humor? And I think in native humor, there's a lot of teasing. There's a lot of teasing. And that I think is sort of a difference. It's like, it's not so much about like the gotcha and like wordplay and being fast. It's more about sort of like knowing your friends and needling them, you know, and getting them, or to like take people who are up high and, you know, just like kind of like let them know like they should have some humility. But I will say what is the same about native humor and Jewish humor is like, you know, we've been through some stuff with people, you know, and there's a way of dealing with hard things. And I see it in both sides where like I went to visit my dad's grave at a cemetery in Oklahoma with my native family. And oh my God, you would think we were like, people were cracking jokes like left and right at the cemetery. Like, you know, like, and somebody even called it out, like sort of like, who would have thought we'd all be here at the cemetery, like laughing, you know, this is where we laughed the most, was at the cemetery. And I think that's what's common about Jews and Native Americans in their humor. You know, you're going to have to be in a cemetery.
Amazing. So Emily, this has been so nice. So I just want to say 2 notes to you and to the audience before we close out that are just super nice. Somebody asked if you had ever heard of the story Little Bird, a TV movie about a Native Canadian Jewish woman adopted by an American Jew who searches for her native. So she's recommending that.
Big recommendation. Yeah, and then, it's awesome.
And then somebody who also had family members. So you're right. There's a big community out there that we just don't know about. So I can't thank you enough for your for being so candid and thoughtful and wonderful. Just final plug for the book.
I'll do too.
Should read it. It's really great. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been such a treat. And I'm honored.
Oh, listen, thank you.